I came back to Bangkok and I was overwhelmed with the ideas. And it's almost like if you're a founder, then that means you already have this capacity for ideas and creativity. And you need to feed that. And for me, it was going in the field, being in the face of problems, having to sort out issues. So it's about dosage. As entrepreneurs, we know what feeds that creativity. And we just need to make sure we take doses of it.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Mission Driven Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with mission-driven entrepreneurs, investors, academics, the ecosystem of individuals who look out the window, see a problem, and want to leverage entrepreneurship and innovation to solve that challenge. For me, it's all about empowering, inspiring, and equipping the next generation of aspiring entrepreneurs, but then also reaching out to those who are kind of stuck in the valley of death, trying to find their way out to scale. With that, I'm extremely honored to be joined by Aarti Kapoor, who is the founder and managing director of Embode. Embode is an international consultancy focusing on human rights and social protection, responsible business, and organizational analysis. She's normally based in Bangkok, but often traveling around the region, working with groups, trying to help them, through this challenge, which we will get into. But Aarti, it's great to have you with us.
Fantastic to be here, Rich. Really, really an honor to be amongst all the people that you normally interview, and always great to have a nice conversation with you.
Great. So as a starting point, we always like to ask, who are you and what is the mission that you're on?
So the mission I'm on is to protect and promote human rights and making sure that people have basic minimum dignity in their working lives and in their main living conditions.
How did you come into the work? What was your background in it? Did you come from the nonprofit space? Is it something you studied? Is it something you fell into? Or was it like a personal, say, calling that you found yourself in when you were getting started?
It was my basic calling. So from a very young age, I was always really concerned and taken with social justice issues. Whether it was from experiencing gender-based kind of bullying or racist bullying at school myself, or seeing kind of injustices in my own life and really feeling how unjust, unfair this was. And then really feeling like it curtailed my capacity to really have my full potential. And so that created a kind of level of empathy in me. And I really felt driven by causes. And so I ended up studying law. And then by the time I came out of that, I very quickly joined social causes.
So you were trained as a lawyer, not as a social worker. So how did you end up practicing law? How did that work out? Because I can imagine you put a lot of time into law school, and then you jump into nonprofit. That couldn't have been good.
So no, I mean it was definitely something that that I had to come to terms with. So I first started, I finished the law degree, and then I ended up going off to Cambodia. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll stay in Cambodia for a year. And I'll work on, these issues of sexual exploitation of children and women and girls. And then I'll go back to London and I'll carry on with my kind of legal career.
You're in London, you get your law degree, and you're like, I'm going to go to Cambodia. How did you pick Cambodia and the NGO itself? Like when it, sexploitation, that doesn't necessarily align to the topic that you're studying or your own path. So how did you end up in that position to say like, I'm going to give this a year, and then what was it about that year? Like if you look back that, had its hooks in you that actually said like, no, you are stuck in, as you called, and this is going to be your future path.
My answer is not the normal formula that I hear other people say when they get asked that question. One of the key reasons that I went off to Cambodia was because all the doors of opportunity were shutting in my face in the UK. And then the opportunity came up where I was offered a chance to go to Cambodia with a friend. And while I was there, I was introduced to an NGO and the founders of an NGO. And what I found contagious about it was that they were as passionate as I felt about things. And it was easy then to be driven by a mission that in some ways is created by somebody else. And I wanted to join that mission because I felt called to. And time again in my life, I have come across situations where the slamming the door in your face, the so-called failure has actually led me to the one thing I needed to do. And whilst I might feel like it was unfair, in hindsight, nothing was unfair. It was all leading me to something while I was, leading me to something that I was called to be doing. Yeah. So in the end, had I gone through that legal career, right, Rich, I don't think I would have founded and been the managing director of a human rights, firm or a company the way I am now.
I think like when I started hands-on as a nonprofit, like it was just a weekend thing. I didn't expect it to become such a a thing, and it'd have 30, 40, 50 employees at any one time. Like it just happens as it does, right? And you get caught up in the work, and you realize like this is actually what's important, right? Like whatever you were studying for isn't necessarily the thing. So I'm curious, like that year in Cambodia, that was really hard work. I can imagine. I know like roughly the time that you were there, like that was kind of peak, whatever it was. I don't even know what to call it, but it was like
2002.
the peak time for that.
2002 to 2006 is 4 years in the end. 1 year turned into 4 years. I didn't want to leave, but it was hard.
Yeah.
You're right, because Cambodia at that time too.
Yeah. So what kept you there? Like what was the work that you were involved with, and what kept you there? Because that was really difficult times for Cambodia in terms of those topics that you're talking about. So, what were you going through? What were you learning? What did you come out with?
I realized that after 1 year, I'd only got started. So basically, I'd only started learning about being in Cambodia. I started speaking Khmer. And after a year, I thought, wow, I need to actually contribute because I've just spent a year learning. And the other thing that happened was that I was doing a lot then. I was not just working in an NGO, I was lecturing part-time in the evenings. I was doing other consultancies for UN agencies and Asian Development Bank. And then I was also working with the British Embassy, who were representing nationals from other countries as well, with their work on traveling child sex offenders, the US Embassy, the US law enforcement, the Canadians, the Australians. And so at that time in Cambodia, there were a lot of child sex offenders that were traveling to Cambodia to abuse children, which was another subset of sexual exploitation. So 1 year wasn't enough, Rich. And I felt myself able to more and more make a difference and contribute. So that's why I stayed.
Okay, so you're there for 4 years. What happened after that before Embode?
Right. So then, in a nutshell, I was invited, encouraged, prompted to come back home by Jim Gamble, who set up the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. Came back to the UK, where I undertook the first government commissioned assessment on child trafficking into the UK. Collaborated with 52 police forces, immigration, social services, and NGOs. And that research was published. I think it was published in the end in 2007. And after that, the Home Office funded setting up of a whole child trafficking unit. And I think as the UK government, we were the first to really start looking into the issue of trafficking of people. And so it was wonderful to contribute to that. And then after 4 years of that, I ended up going back to Asia, and then ran a 3.5, 4 year program funded by the Australian government this time across Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, again on the prevention of child sexual exploitation of children. And it was mainly focused on tourism. So that was my first inroad into working on social protection issues and business.
So what were kind of like your takeaways from this challenge then? Like you see the three different approaches, you see the multi-stakeholders from different angles. What was broken that you thought that you could fix, and what was actually maybe going right? Like what were you excited by, or what were you seeing through the latter part of that time where you're like, okay, we're making progress that you could take away from? Like I'm curious, like what your takeaways were just from that time and those very different roles from very different stakeholders, so that would then lead you to launching Embode.
That's right. Thank you for that question. It's perfect, because I saw that if we really want to change, the lot of human misery in this world, it's never going to be just one actor. It can't be just non-profit and the social, and the kind of NGO world. It can't also just be government, and it can't also just be businesses, and it can't, so it actually takes effective intersystemic, interorganizational working in order for us to build a world we all want to live in. So that was the number one. Number two, what I found was that was breaking down. Even if 2 or 3 organizations in any one of those sectors is trying to work together, what I found time and time again was that within an organization, people let down the mission, people let down the purpose. And one of the things I think why mission-led people go on to become mission-led entrepreneurs is because they see that, you know, people let down their own mission in organizations that they've worked in, perhaps to some extent. It's not just always about a new idea. You know, that's been my thing. So I went off and did a second master's in systems leadership and organizational analysis. And one of my main theses focused on intersystemic working. How do you actually hold people accountable who have formal responsibility? You know, one of the things that worked when I was in government, for example, was that I worked really well with my counterpart across law enforcement, police forces, across the Ministry of Education, the Immigration, the Home Office. And so we had counterparts and we worked together because we were clear on the mission that we were trying to do, but we needed to understand it from each organization's own agenda. So that's the main thing that I saw was broken. And that happens also within organizations. You can have an accounting department sitting with a fundraising department, sitting with a programs department, and they're all only seeing the situation, you know, from their own side. But how do you actually come together and collaborate to find solutions together? And part of that is about systemic accountability.
I have a lot of conversations where our industries are broken, like the people who are trying to change systems, the world, people, whatever it is, like there's a brokenness there. And I'm curious, like what you saw, like when you say that part was broken, is this about laziness, inertia, defense of old ideas? Is this about being overwhelmed by the work and like just kind of being burned out? Like what do you, because I know like there's so many different, there's a spectrum of truths there, but I'm curious, the ones that you're the most concerned with, the ones that you thought you could fight against, what were they? Because I see a lot of people who are just defending old process because they're not close enough to the ground anymore. They don't know any different. But then I also see people who are like, you know, I've got a nice package. I'm with a an MDG, and I've got a nice car, I got a nice house, my kids are in school. So don't do anything too much because then I might rock that boat. And so I'm just curious, like, you know, what did you see in terms of the spectrum of that brokenness? Was it inertia? Was it indifference? Was it ignorance? What were you seeing?
So let's say that what I found was if you want to solve child labor, you know, how do you solve it? Now, if you're looking at it from the point of view of a business, you'll think that, well, people just need to not put children to work. Whereas a government might say, well, you know, these children, you know, need to be in school. Whereas an NGO will say, you know, those people are, you know, doing the bad thing. It's because the business is behaving the way it is. And so I'm just giving it really simplistically here. So you've got a situation where nobody can take full accountability. Nobody can solve the problem on its own. And sometimes we get into blame gaming. Or we can take too much responsibility. So if a business feels that they've got to take responsibility for all of child labor in their supply chain, they're never going to be able to solve it because that's not the answer. So the part, just to go back to that question, as in what was breaking down, when we were looking at these social issues of child labor, children in these kind of circumstances, begging and, you know, in tourism locations, or child labor in cocoa, which I've done a lot of work on, we see that people are rushing to quickly fix the issue because it's bad publicity to say that, you know, the chocolate that you're selling has child labor, you know, producing the cocoa, or the clothes that you're wearing, you know. But what actually is the cause of child labor? How does it actually manifest? How do you solve it? That is a lot more complex, and it takes time, it takes awareness, and it takes all of these actors from education to business to civil society actually working together. And that's the part that I felt frustrated about, Rich. I felt that if we carry on just looking at it in a one-sided way, that we would never solve the issue of child labor. And, you know, and so by the time I was coming to build, you know, found Embode, I'd already been working in these sectors for 15 years. I saw what actually works. how good change happens for people, and how you can waste, tens of millions and billions of dollars. You can waste decades arguing about the approach to ending child labor, to ending exploitation, trafficking of people. And how much do we love sitting in conferences, talking about these things? How much do we love writing reports and trying to count the number of children in child labor? And what could you be spending that resource and that attention rather on, actually, if you took a child-centered perspective? So that's the key. I just wanted to say, bringing it back to human rights. People can be motivated by different things, but yeah.
Embode, what is it? And in the context of this, these dynamics that are happening, why did you think that you need to then jump out of existing platforms, be it nonprofit, government, and then those working between the stakeholders, to develop your own platform as an external agency to support others?
The main approach that I always took throughout my, that kind of epiphany that I had in Cambodia early on, that just having good laws is not enough. By the time I wanted to set up Embode, what became really clear was that one thread, which is that real human progress happens when we're not in survival, when people have enough water, electricity, they have some level of, income, they've got enough information and education. And Embode is the culmination of two words. It's abode and embody. So it's about really putting yourself in the place of these people that we are trying to support, and thinking about what will make their life better. And by this time, I'd spent 20 odd years working on human rights, but I didn't feel that any of this, there wasn't a consistent understanding of what is actually going to make a difference to the very people we're trying to help.
Was there a specific one gap that you were trying to fill that you saw none of these platforms could do? Or did you feel that as an external, you had the ability to better coordinate those that are already in the field to bring them together? Or did you realize, like, no, actually, I just need to work with corporate. I need to make a little bit more money. I need to make this a little bit more sustainable. So I'm not basing on, government grants or philanthropy.
So starting up Embode meant that as a consulting agency was, number one, we could be completely objective. Number two, we were being paid for our expertise, and we were being paid for our independence, which is fundamental. We're being paid for our independent and objective point of view. Thirdly, we could be clear about what we stood for, and clients would self-select. So to this day, it's been 11 years since founding Embode, our clients self-select. We don't get clients that don't actually care about human rights. All of our clients genuinely care about, human rights. Even if it's that sustainability person that's in that specific department, they're coming to us because they know we represent something. So I often get asked, oh, are corporates coming to you just to, kind of greenwash or blue wash or whatever it's called for human rights? No, they don't. If any do, they soon turn away because they know that they're not going to get that from us, because what we stand for is depth.
Now, when it comes to, and actually I will say I started Collective with very much a similar mindset, like I only want to work with the best. But I'm going to be honest, there weren't a lot out there, and they often didn't need your help as an external. Like they often, like if you think about a Patagonia or whatever, like they built in a lot of the infrastructure internally. So, you had that similar mindset. What did you find when you first went out to the market? Like, was it a really, was your filter too high and you had to kind of widen it, or was it actually you just waited until people understood like what you're trying to do and then they came to you? Like, how did you approach the market? Because I can imagine the people who are willing to pay you the most and where you have the most scalable business is actually not in the people who are the most committed. And I'm not going to say the most likely to greenwash, blue wash. I think orange wash is what you're going for because the women's bond is the orange bond now. Like I'm not saying that they're all their intention is to, not be true, but like the ones that have the most challenges tend to be the ones who would reach out to you and therefore would be the best business model for you. So how did you balance that? Because I'm curious, as someone who tried the same thing, I often found out like, yeah, these groups that really get it, they actually already have a lot of the answers. They just need the time. Where the other ones who appear to be like the dirty ones that I didn't necessarily want to work with, they're actually the ones where I need to do the work. So I'm curious, like how you balance that, or how you set your filters to make sure that you stay true to that value.
And what was really interesting was that early on, I had the calling for Embode and the idea for Embode, and it was just almost waiting to be born into the real world. And on my desk landed a request to make a proposal to investigate child labor and child slavery in West Africa, in the cocoa sector. And the request for the proposal was from one of the largest chocolate brands, chocolate companies in the world. And before I knew it, I had their request and their agreement to go ahead. And so I actually already had their contract, or the offer of their contract, in my hand before I actually went and registered. Now, coming back to your point about what about good versus those that don't need the help. So all our clients obviously need help and support, and the help and support they need is in the how. They've got the right idea and they come to us and say, we've got a problem, what do you think? And these are the best clients, because they come to us and they say, we've got this problem, what do you think? And then usually it's me that's kind of having the initial conversations, and we talk through it, we walk through it and say, this is the approach that we take. If they agree at this point that this resonates with them, then they'll go ahead with us. If at this point they are looking for the blue washing or orange washing or whatever you say, they'll probably go away. Because our approach is not tick box. Our approach says, you want to solve child labor? You want to solve these risks? Okay, let's step back a minute. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. If you've got this level of concern for child labor in West African cocoa cultivation, why is it happening? It's not happening because people have malevolent intentions. Let's put that aside. It's because there's this level of poverty. There's level of survival. There's no access to school. It's a socio-cultural phenomena as well. And there's a whole level of this supply chain. So the solution is not going to happen overnight. Then I say to the clients, are you willing to accept that you will not be able to find a solution to this in 1 year?
Actually, sorry, let me cut you off real quick and dive in. So in under a year. So
that's the point. If we really want to see like real change from people being exploited, children and adults being exploited, to people actually living full, healthy lives where they're thriving, not trying to survive, that's not going to happen in 1 year. And especially it's not going to happen even in 10 years if we take the approach that I will say. So for example, if it's not even going to happen in 10 years, if we carry on taking the approach that you want to take, are you willing to listen to what I'm saying about why your approach is not working? If they say, look, we just need to make the consumers happy, we need to make our shareholders happy, I need to make my boss happy, then they will just go to somebody else.
When you said that they come to you with the right idea often, or a good idea. Is it your...
No, it's not that. It's not that they've come to us with the good idea. They come to us with the problem, and they are like pulling their hair out, wondering how to solve this problem. Number one. Number two, they've tried lots of other things, and those things aren't resonating with them. And so they come to us, and I say, right, we take a systems development approach. This is what it means. It sounds like lots of buzzwords, but this is actually what it means. Because you have to look at the causes of the human rights problem. And if you don't understand the causes properly, you'll never get to actually find the answer and the solutions properly. Yeah.
Now, as an entrepreneur who's building an agency, I can imagine you can quickly shift your scope to try and help them as much as possible. So you go from this process to like, hey, we can help you to run it. We can help you to monitor. Like, how, as an entrepreneur, have you approached making sure that you do the work that you do really well and being considered about how much you expand? Because I got into program management. I got into 6, 8-year engagements that, yeah, I mean, fantastic work, not going to lie. But to build an organization that does all of that versus an organization that just does the first piece and then helps them with their infrastructure, very different organizations. So
now already we've worked with over 1,000 supply chain businesses across Asia. And we're working with them just on training, or we have in-depth capability building programs with all kinds of manufacturers across Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, India. And so when we start working with multiple clients, with numerous suppliers across these countries, we start seeing patterns. And we start realizing why programmatic interventions don't work and which ones do work. We also start learning more about what does drive change, what actually helps workers feel better at work, what stops them being exploited, who has the most control over, let's say, a migrant worker, a Myanmar worker in Thailand. So then we think, right, rather than this kind of abject idea that workers shouldn't be exploited and they should have these rights, X, Y, and Z. What we're doing is we go inside that system and we say, right, who's got the biggest influence on that actual life? It's their supervisor, it's their manager, it's their employer. That's why we focus on what we call suppliers, but actually it's the businesses. And we focus on training their managers. That's our main approach. So then when we start seeing patterns, we keep being asked this thing. And when we go out and find these problems, we see there's a gap here. And then we build that learning, and then we have offered that service.
and then how do you follow through like the next 3, 5, 10 years? You've seen where all these initiatives over time can kind of fall off. How do you design your platform, your programs to not do that, to actually, maintain course even if the economy is awful or migration's up or it's too hot outside? Like, there's all kinds of things happening to these businesses that make them want to kind of lean back a little bit. How do you protect against that? Because as an entrepreneur, like that was your mission to do. So how do you approach that differently than maybe some others have?
So we build in an iterative way. And it's in fact how we also promote changes in supply chains, is that it needs to be developed iteratively year on year. As long as the needle is moving in the right direction. It's not about how fast you go, it's about moving, and it's about making progress. And so that's the methodical approach that I've always used in Embode. And then year on year, we build on the learning. So that does mean that we're not trying to go at breakneck speed. It's quite interesting. Yeah. And we've grown organically. We've grown organically. That's right.
Well, I think a lot of people talk about scale as like this thing that you have to keep just constant, hyperbolic growth. But actually, more and more I'm talking to people, it's actually just about, no, small is beautiful, focus on the details, get that work done. And then, yeah, I mean, you kind of in the back of your mind, like, I wish we could do more because this challenge keeps growing. But also recognize that if you were to change so that you could scale, you'd be having a different impact than you started out with. Like your values would have to shift a little bit. And I think this is an inherent struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs have when they start these organizations, because you start really trying to solve the problem and thinking, if my platform were to grow to X, it would be done. But in reality, you get into it, you're like, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought it would be. I get, and in thinking about that, like, as you're doing this work, are there still some limitations you see to the work of being an external advisor? Like, can you actually have, like, is it, you're able to influence in different ways, but actually there's still limitations to being the external, to actually having the full impact that you would like to have?
The main limitation is because of this growing human rights due diligence, corporate responsibility requirements put on businesses, that they are under external pressure. They might be under external pressure from their governments to make sure they've got due diligence in place. But mainly it's coming from media, it's coming from NGO advocacy. And so this pressure is creating a kind of dissonance in understanding how you do human rights due diligence, how you actually protect human rights in your supply chains. I say it's dissonance because it makes it more simple than it is. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because it's not, when people talk about child labor, right? This is I'm just going to use this because it's most clearest. When people talk about child labor, it attracts attention. But if you're talking about child education or child, it doesn't attract the same attention. But what if the answer to child labor, I mean, it's part of the answer, is, child education? And then you're trying to sell this to, let's say, other parts of the business. Well, how about we build, how about we collaborate with government to increase access to schools in, let's say, parts of different countries? That will reduce the risk to child labor. But that's difficult to sell, because child education doesn't sound like child labor. And sometimes you're just trying to get people's attention. So coming from the outside, when I'm on the outside of these companies, sometimes I'm trying to convince them, but then the other part of it is they've got to then go and convince, the other stakeholders within the business. And that's, I think, the hard part for me, because I would rather just talk to everybody together. But, I don't have direct access to, all the people within companies. So that's one of the main things that kind of happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's as any agency will tell you. I mean, the space that we've been in, it's very difficult, right? And I think like this is the question. So, if you were to look back on this 11 years, what is it about Embode that you're like, no, this is exactly why we do it, and we're the right organization? And what is it about your other experiences you're like, actually, I kind of wish I had this with me as well?
The main thing that I've found, the one thing about Embode, is that we continue to build and we continue to iterate. And I like what you said about, small is beautiful. We're not so small, but we're definitely not, hundreds of people or anything like that. At the same time, we can stay true to our values, and our idea of scale is in the influence and the impact we make on the businesses that are our clients. Now, if you get some of the biggest companies in the world adopting the systems approach, supporting development, socioeconomic development, not by taking all the responsibility for that, but actually helping to build that in their supply chains, you'll see huge changes in human rights. You'll see huge changes in protection. So that's for us where we make impact. That for us is where we can create scale. And so our approach has always been build in the right way, build it right in the first way. And that's where the models will stay sustainable forever. So our idea of scale is influencing some of the biggest companies in the world and their global supply chains.
Where do you see yourself going the next 3, 5, 10 years?
So I would really love to be able to document more of the learning and leave more of a legacy with how I guide the team. And hopefully I'd love them to be able to take over. I've just spent a week or 8 days in Singapore with members of my team and client. And I realized for the first time what a large age gap there was between me and the rest of the team that I was with. I mean, they were all much younger than me. And I just enjoyed their passion. And I enjoyed just kind of giving guidance where and when it was needed. And then just watching them go ahead. And so that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to document and share more of that rather than doing it all myself. Yeah.
So as you build in the next generation of leadership, what has been your path? I mean, this is a hard one for a lot of entrepreneurs, is to build in the people that will replace them as they kind of pull back or move on, and they sell the organization back to the employees. Like, how do you look at this, and what are some of the key steps you're taking to set up that next generation of leaders that really, I won't say take over and replace you, but to be in a position that they're fully coming to their own mature careers?
Yes, I mean, I've always set up Embode from the beginning as having regular reflective spaces. So we have we run 100% remotely. Coming back to what am I doing, I think more and more I prefer my team to come to me when they need support. At the same time, having regular events in the diary that create the experience of an organization. But I think that's yet to come about how I will do that. It's still early days for me. Still early days. Yeah.
Well, there's some previous experience in our community, I think, that will help you, but it's a critical one. It's probably the hardest thing, I think, for most founders to get right, especially if they think it's going to happen quickly. Like it's a 5 to 10 year process to build that next layer in to kind of be ready for when you are ready to have time, or like even take on another initiative, and then you trust them to run the organization. Like it definitely takes time.
Yes, I want to know how others do it. And I'd love to really get into that process because, yes, I think other things are going to be waiting for me as well. So,
well, I guess as a kind of last question, what are some of the skill sets and mindsets you think are the most critical to tackling these systemic problems as an entrepreneur? Like, how should you approach building an organization, skill set, mindset for tackling these things?
Curiosity, constant learning. Being able to put your feet in the shoes of others, and making sure you have a reflective capacity. If you cannot look at your own shadows, and if one cannot look at how your own blind spots are, you're never going to be able to understand, each other. And humility is very important. One of the things that we regularly do, Rich, is that we've done it 3 times now, and I'm going to be doing the 4th one in Kuala Lumpur in about 2 weeks. We get a room full of people. We get migrant workers. The last one was migrant workers from Cambodia and Myanmar in Bangkok. And then we get sustainability and human rights leads of some of the largest FMCG companies in the world. And we get them in a room together, and I facilitate dialogue. I facilitate icebreakers, games, and then I get everyone to talk together. And the reason I do it is not because it's going to fulfill anybody's checkbox of human rights due diligence, but what it does is exercise talking and listening without preconception about what it means to be in the life of a migrant worker, because everyone's got an idea about that. So the main things that we need is, and don't presume what it means to be the manager or a recruitment agent or a corporate. No assumptions. Go in with no assumptions and just be curious. And then when you understand them, their perspective, their feelings, their problems that they're trying to solve, then you can actually start being of help. So that's the main thing if you want to grow systemic accountability and you want to work in that area.
So that leads me to my last question, which is always, it's a different one that I normally ask, which is, how important is it then for you to be on the ground as an entrepreneur, and how challenging is that, given you got to do the sales, you have to do the HR, you have to do the organization, like you have the organization to run, but how important is it for you to make sure that you are in the work on a regular basis?
That's right. I think you need doses of it. You don't have to be there all the time. I struggle with that too. But I ended up, I was with my team in Singapore about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and my team were interviewing migrant workers from Bangladesh and India. And I decided to do one interview myself, just one. Even though I was busy doing lots of other things, I just decided to interview one worker myself in my broken Hindi and his broken Hindi. And I just wanted to have a conversation. That's it. And then watching the team, watching the client, having to deal with issues, I came back to Bangkok and I was overwhelmed with the ideas and the creative ideas I was having. And it's almost like if you're a founder, especially if you're a founder entrepreneur, then that means you already have this capacity for ideas and creativity. It's something that you have, and you need to feed that. So you have to do what it takes to feed that. And for me, it was going in the field, being in the face of problems, having to sort out issues. I came back to Bangkok. I was absolutely knackered. I was so tired, but my brain wouldn't go to sleep. And all I needed was to write down all of my ideas. So it's about dosage. It's about dosage. As entrepreneurs, we know what feeds that creativity, and we just need to make sure we take doses of it.